Captain Jake Morrison stood in the communication room of the spaceship New Horizon. The blue lights on the control panel blinked slowly as he waited for the message to come through. This was the day humans had been waiting for since they first left Earth and traveled to the stars. Lieutenant Amy Davis sat at her station, her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. She had been working as the ship's communication officer for 5 years, but today felt different. Today, they would receive humanity's first official invitation to join something called the Galactic Federation. A message came through the quantum relay system with a soft beep. Amy looked up at Jake with wide eyes. "Captain, the message is here. It's from Ambassador Crix of the Zentari species." Jake nodded and walked closer to the screen. The translation system worked for several minutes before the words appeared in English. The message was formal and polite, welcoming humanity to join the galaxy's greatest alliance of peaceful species. Dr. Ben Carter entered the room just as Amy finished reading the message aloud. Ben was the ship's expert on alien life forms, and he had been studying every piece of information they could find about other species in the galaxy. "This is amazing," Ben said, looking at the message on the screen. "They want to meet us at their capital ship in 2 weeks. This could change everything for humanity." Jake read through the message again, paying attention to every word. Most of it was standard diplomatic language, welcoming Earth to join the Federation and explaining the benefits of membership. But there was one part that seemed odd. "Amy, look at this section about boarding protocols," Jake said, pointing to the screen. "It says all humans must remove their environmental helmets before boarding any Federation vessel. Why would they care about our helmets?" Amy frowned as she read the section again. "That is strange, Captain. Most of the other species we've heard about wear different kinds of protective gear. Why would they single out our helmets?" Dr. Carter moved closer to read the message. "I've been studying the Federation database for months, and I've never seen a similar requirement for other species. The Vorthans wear breathing masks, the Kalari have environmental suits, and the Zephyrians use full body protection. But none of them have restrictions about removing their gear." Jake decided to ask Ambassador Crix directly about this unusual requirement. Amy sent a message asking for clarification about the helmet protocol. The response came back within an hour, but it didn't provide much information. "Ambassador Crix says it's a cultural sensitivity matter," Amy reported. "He says that wearing helmets during first meetings can be seen as rude or threatening by some Federation species." Ben shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. If it was about cultural sensitivity, they would have similar rules for other species. There has to be another reason." Commander Lisa Hayes entered the communication room. She was responsible for preparing the human delegation for their historic journey to meet the Federation. "Captain, I've been reviewing the boarding protocols. Everything seems standard except for this helmet requirement. Should we be concerned?" Jake thought for a moment. "We don't have much choice. If we want to join the Federation, we have to follow the rules. But I want everyone to stay alert. There might be more to this than they're telling us." Over the next week, the crew of the New Horizon prepared for their departure. Jake selected a team of 12 people to represent humanity at the Federation meeting. Amy would handle communications, Ben would study the alien species they would meet, and Lisa would coordinate security and logistics. Dr. Susan Clark, the ship's cultural expert, spent her time learning about Federation customs and traditions. She practiced the proper greeting gestures for each species and memorized the basic rules of diplomatic interaction. Commander Tony Reed, the ship's military advisor, reviewed the technical specifications of the Federation capital ship. He wanted to understand the layout and systems in case of emergency. As the departure date approached, Ben continued his research into the helmet requirement. He searched through every available Federation database, looking for any mention of similar restrictions on other species. The more he searched, the more convinced he became that this rule was specifically created for humans. "Captain, I think we should install some recording devices in our helmet storage area," Ben suggested during their final preparation meeting. "If there's something important about this requirement, we need to document it." Jake agreed, and Ben secretly installed tiny cameras in the shuttle's helmet storage compartment. The cameras were so small that they would be almost impossible to detect, but they would record everything that happened. The day of departure arrived with great excitement. News organizations across Earth reported on humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Federation. Jake and his team boarded their shuttle and began the journey to the Federation capital ship dot as they traveled through space. Amy monitored communications between the shuttle and the Federation vessel. Everything seemed normal, but she noticed that the Federation ship's crew asked several times about the human delegation's helmet status. "They really want to make sure we remove our helmets," Amy observed. "They've asked about it 5 times already." Ben looked out the shuttle window at the massive Federation ship growing larger in front of them. "Whatever their reason we're about to find out. Are you ready for this, Captain?" Jake nodded and looked at his team. Each person had their helmet secure, but ready to remove as soon as they docked with the Federation vessel. "Remember, we're representing all of humanity today. Stay alert, follow the protocols, and let's make a good first impression." The shuttle approached the docking bay of the Federation capital ship. Jake could see alien figures waiting for them through the transparent barrier. In a few minutes, they would remove their helmets and step into a new chapter of human history. None of them knew that this simple act of removing their helmets would reveal a secret that had been hidden for thousands of years. The docking bay of the Federation flagship Stellar Unity was enormous. Jake Morrison and his team walked through the airlock, carrying their helmets as instructed. The artificial gravity felt similar to Earth's, and the air was breathable for humans. Ambassador Crix waited for them near the entrance. He was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and large eyes that seemed to watch everything at once. Behind him stood representatives from dozens of alien species, all gathered to welcome humanity to the Federation. "Welcome, humans, Ambassador," Crix said through his translation device. "We are honored to have you join our alliance." Jake shook hands with the ambassador, noting that Crix's grip was firm, but his movements seemed careful and controlled. "Thank you for inviting us. We look forward to learning about the Federation and contributing to galactic peace." As the human delegation moved through the welcome ceremony, Amy Davis noticed something strange. Many of the alien species wore various types of protective equipment. The Kalari had breathing masks, the Zephyrians wore environmental suits, and several other species had helmets or protective gear. But humans were the only ones who had been required to remove their helmets before boarding. Dr. Susan Clark tried to blend in during the ceremony. Observing the behavior of different alien species, she noticed that whenever humans moved quickly or made gestures with their hands, some aliens would step back slightly. It was subtle, but it happened consistently. "Captain," Susan whispered to Jake during a quiet moment, "have you noticed how some of the aliens react when we move? They seem nervous." Jake had noticed the same thing. "Yes, I've seen it too. They're trying to hide it, but there's definitely some kind of tension." Commander Tony Reed was standing near a group of Vorthan officials when he overheard part of their conversation. The universal translator worked slowly, but he caught fragments of what they were saying. "Never forget the helmet incident. Double quotes. One Vorthan said to another. Containment procedures are working. Double quotes. The second replied. Hope they never find out about Protocol 7 Alpha." Tony moved closer, trying to hear more, but the Vorthans noticed him approaching. They immediately switched to what sounded like encrypted communication. speaking in rapid clicks and whistles that the translator couldn't process. Meanwhile, Amy was monitoring communication channels from her portable device. She had been given permission to stay connected to the New Horizon during the meeting. What she discovered made her uncomfortable. The Federation had been sending and receiving classified messages about humans for the entire duration of the welcome ceremony. The messages were heavily encrypted, but Amy could see the traffic patterns. There was far more communication happening than would be normal for a simple diplomatic meeting. Dr. Carter, Amy called quietly to Ben, who was studying the alien species. Around them, I'm picking up a lot of encrypted communication. They're talking about us, but I can't break the encryption. Ben frowned. That's not normal for a diplomatic meeting. Usually, most communication during these events is public or low-level administrative stuff. Dr. Carter had been watching the aliens' behavior patterns since they arrived. Several species showed signs of stress when humans were nearby. Heart rate increases, changes in posture, and what appeared to be nervous movements. Amy, can you scan for any historical references to humans in their communication logs? Ben asked. Amy worked on her device for several minutes. I'm finding references going back decades. They've been monitoring human space activities for a long time, Captain. Much longer than we thought. The welcome ceremony continued for 2 hours. Jake and his team met representatives from 47 different species. Each introduction was polite and formal, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from them. During a break in the ceremony, Jake approached Ambassador Crix privately. Ambassador, I need to ask you something directly. Is there a specific reason why humans were required to remove their helmets? The real reason, not the cultural sensitivity explanation. Crix's large eyes seemed to grow even larger. He looked around nervously before answering. Captain Morrison, there are some things that are difficult to explain. The helmet requirement exists for good reasons, but those reasons are complicated. What kind of complications? Jake pressed. Historical complications, Crix replied carefully. There was an incident many years ago. It created certain protocols that we follow for the safety of all Federation members. Jake felt his patience wearing thin. Ambassador, if we're going to join the Federation, we need to understand any issues that might affect our membership. What happened in this incident? Crix was quiet for a long moment. He seemed to be struggling with a decision. Finally, he spoke in a low voice. Captain, if I show you the truth, it will change how you see your species' place in the galaxy. Are you prepared for that? Yes, Jake said without hesitation. We need to know. Ambassador Crix looked around the room once more, then gestured for Jake to follow him. Bring your senior staff. We will go to the restricted archives. But I must warn you, what you will see there explains everything about why your species makes others in the galaxy uncomfortable. Jake signaled to his team. Amy, Ben, Susan, Tony, and Lisa gathered around him. They followed Ambassador Crix through several corridors and past multiple security checkpoints. Where are we going? Lisa asked. To see classified Federation records. Crix replied, records that show the real reason for the helmet protocol. They reached a heavily secured section of the ship. Crix used multiple authorization codes to open the doors. Inside was a vast archive filled with holographic storage devices and quantum data cores. 89 years ago, Crix began, we had our first contact with humans. It was not planned. A human mining ship was in distress, and one of our patrol vessels rescued them. He activated a holographic display system. The records of that encounter are here. What happened during that rescue created the protocols that govern human Federation interactions today. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional recreation of the interior of a Federation ship. Jake could see human figures being brought aboard by alien rescuers. The humans kept their helmets on during the rescue, Crix explained. Our crew thought this was normal. But then, when the humans felt safe, they did something that changed everything. The hologram showed one of the rescued humans reaching up and removing his helmet. The moment the helmet came off, every alien in the vicinity stopped what they were doing and stared at the human with expressions of shock and fear. What happened? Susan asked. Krix manipulated the controls, showing the scene from different angles. When humans remove their helmets, you perform certain unconscious actions. You run your fingers through your hair. You shake your heads. You touch your faces. These movements, combined with your physical appearance, triggered something in our species' genetic memory. Genetic memory of what? Ben asked. Ambassador Crix paused the hologram and looked directly at Jake. Genetic memory of the Vanguard, an ancient race that once ruled the galaxy with absolute power. A race that looked exactly like humans, and whose helmet removal ritual meant death was coming. The room fell silent as the implications of Crix's words sank in. Jake stared at the frozen hologram, beginning to understand why the galaxy had been so careful about human helmet protocols. The Vanguard, Jake said slowly. Tell us more about them. Ambassador Crix led the human delegation deeper into the Federation archives. The walls were lined with data storage devices that held thousands of years of galactic history. Jake Morrison and his team walked in silence, still processing what they had just learned about the Vanguard. The records you are about to see are classified at the highest level, Crix explained as they entered a secure viewing room. Only the Federation Council and senior military commanders have access to this information. The room was circular, with holographic projectors positioned around the walls. Crix activated the system, and suddenly the humans were surrounded by three-dimensional images of an ancient civilization. The Vanguard ruled the galaxy 3,000 years ago, Crix began. They were the most advanced species anyone had ever encountered. Their technology was beyond what most civilizations could even imagine. Dr. Ben Carter studied the holographic images carefully. The Vanguard looked remarkably similar to humans. They had the same basic body structure, the same facial features, and the same proportions. The only major difference was their clothing and equipment. They're almost identical to us, Ben observed. How is that possible? We have wondered about that for centuries, Crix replied. The physical similarities are too close to be coincidental. But there is one key difference that made the Vanguard so feared. The hologram changed to show a Vanguard individual wearing a biomechanical helmet. The helmet covered the entire head and face, with glowing elements that seemed to pulse with energy. The Vanguard always wore these helmets, Crix explained. They were not just protective gear. The helmets were connected to their nervous systems and enhanced their mental abilities. With these helmets, they could process information faster than any other species, control multiple technologies simultaneously, and coordinate complex military operations. Amy Davis watched the holographic display with growing unease. If they always wore helmets, why does our helmet removal frighten other species? Crix manipulated the controls, and the scene changed to show a Vanguard military commander standing before a group of alien representatives. The commander slowly reached up and removed his helmet, revealing a face that could have belonged to any human. The only time the Vanguard removed their helmets was when they were about to make announcements of great importance, Crix said. Usually, these announcements involved the destruction of entire star systems or the execution of millions of beings. The hologram showed the aftermath of Vanguard decisions. Planets reduced to ash, space stations destroyed, and entire civilizations wiped from existence. The destruction was total and efficient. The helmet removal became a ritual, Crix continued. When a Vanguard leader removed their helmet, it meant that judgment had been passed and death was coming. Entire species developed genetic memories of this gesture. Even now, thousands of years later, seeing someone who looks like a vanguard remove their helmet triggers deep psychological trauma in most Federation species. Commander Lisa Hayes studied the historical records with professional interest. How did the Vanguard maintain control over so many species? Through fear and superior technology, Crix replied, but also through something else. The Vanguard had a natural ability to command respect and obedience. Other species found it difficult to resist their authority, even when they wanted to. Dr. Susan Clark had been quiet during the presentation, but now she spoke up. Ambassador, are you saying that humans have this same ability? Crix nodded slowly. During the rescue incident 89 years ago, when the human miner removed his helmet, half of our crew suffered immediate psychological breakdown. They were convinced that the Vanguard had returned to destroy them. The hologram showed security footage from the rescue ship. The moment the human removed his helmet, alien crew members began backing away in terror. Some fell to their knees, others ran from the room, and several required medical attention for severe stress reactions. The human mining engineer was completely unaware of what was happening, Crix explained. He was just grateful to be rescued. He ran his fingers through his hair, shook his head to clear it, and touched his face to make sure he was uninjured. These are normal human gestures, but to our crew, they were exact replications of Vanguard behavior patterns. Jake watched the footage with a mixture of fascination and horror. What happened to the human miners? They were quietly returned to human space, Crix replied, but not before we had studied them extensively. The Federation Council spent months debating what to do about the discovery that humans were still in the galaxy. Tony Reed had been analyzing the military aspects of the Vanguard records. Ambassador, you said the Vanguard disappeared. What happened to them? That is one of the greatest mysteries in galactic history, Crix said. 3,000 years ago, the Vanguard simply stopped. Their military campaigns ended, their communications ceased, and their ships vanished from known space. Most species assumed they had destroyed themselves or been destroyed by some unknown force. The hologram shifted to show empty Vanguard facilities and abandoned space stations. Everything was intact, but there were no signs of the Vanguard themselves. Some historians believe they evolved beyond physical existence, Crix continued. Others think they discovered something that made galactic conquest irrelevant. But the most disturbing theory is that they simply moved on to conquest targets outside our galaxy. Ben had been studying the genetic and biological data about the Vanguard. Ambassador, do you have any theories about why humans and Vanguard look so similar? Crix paused for a long moment before answering. The Federation's top scientists have studied this question for decades. The most likely explanation is that humans are descendants of Vanguard who remained in the galaxy when the others departed. The room fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying that humans are related to the Vanguard? The genetic evidence suggests it, Crix replied. Human DNA contains markers that are consistent with Vanguard biological patterns. Your species' rapid technological advancement, your adaptability, and your natural leadership abilities all match. Vanguard characteristics. Amy looked around at her fellow humans. So when we remove our helmets, we're unconsciously mimicking the behavior of our ancestors. Yes, Crix confirmed. And that is why the Federation created the Helmet Protocol. By preventing humans from removing their helmets during space travel, we avoid triggering the psychological trauma that your presence can cause. Susan was thinking about the diplomatic implications. Is this why it took so long for the Federation to make official contact with humanity? The Federation Council has been debating human membership for 89 years, Crix admitted. Some members believe that humans should be welcomed as the natural successors to the Vanguard. Others believe that humanity should be contained or eliminated before you develop the same destructive tendencies. Lisa stepped forward. And what do you believe, Ambassador? Crix looked at each of the humans in turn. I believe that humanity represents either the galaxy's greatest hope or its greatest threat. The question is which path your species will choose. Jake absorbed everything he had learned. Humanity's resemblance to the Vanguard explained the Federation's cautious approach to contact. It also explained why humans had been required to remove their helmets, not as a sign of disrespect, but as a way to minimize psychological trauma to other species. Ambassador, Jake said finally, what happens now? How do we move forward with this knowledge? Crix deactivated the holographic display. That, Captain Norrison, is what we must decide together. The Federation is offering humanity membership, but it comes with conditions. The helmet protocol is just the beginning. As they left the archive room, Jake realized that humanity's future in the galaxy would be shaped not by their desire to explore, but by their unconscious connection to the most feared species in galactic history. The question was whether they could use that connection to build something better than what the Vanguard had created. Ambassador Crix led the human delegation through more corridors of the Federation ship. They were heading to meet someone called the Keeper, who was described as the Federation's most important historian. Jake Morrison and his team were still processing what they had learned about the Vanguard. The Keeper has been alive for over 2,000 years, Crix explained as they walked. She was here during the final days of Vanguard rule. She witnessed their disappearance and has spent centuries studying their history. They entered a vast chamber filled with floating holographic displays. Ancient artifacts were suspended in energy fields, and the walls were covered with historical data streams. At the center of the room sat a being that looked like a combination of crystal and organic matter. Welcome, humans, the Keeper said, her voice resonating through the chamber without the need for translation devices. I have been waiting to meet you for a very long time. Dr. Ben Carter stared at the ancient being in amazement. You were alive during the Vanguard era? I was young when they ruled the galaxy, the Keeper replied. My species, the Eternal Ones, lived for many thousands of years. I remember the fear that gripped every world when Vanguard ships appeared in their skies. The Keeper gestured, and holographic displays activated around the room. The images showed the Vanguard at the height of their power, commanding vast fleets and ruling entire sectors of space. The Vanguard were not evil in the way most species understand evil, the Keeper explained. They were efficient. They saw problems and solved them with ruthless logic. If a species caused conflict, they eliminated it. If a planet had resources they took it. If a government was inefficient, they replaced it. Amy Davis watched the displays with growing concern. They committed genocide. Yes, the Keeper agreed. But from their perspective, they were maintaining order. The Vanguard believed that chaos was the greatest enemy of civilization. They were willing to sacrifice millions to save billions. Commander Lisa Hayes studied the military tactics shown in the displays. How did they maintain control with such a small population? The Vanguard were masters of psychological warfare, the Keeper replied. They understood that fear was more effective than force. One Vanguard commander could control an entire star system simply by making an example of one rebellious world. The Keeper manipulated the displays to show a specific incident. A Vanguard ship approached a planet where the local government had refused to follow Federation orders. The Vanguard commander removed his helmet and made a brief announcement. Within hours, the planet's surface was turned to glass. The helmet removal ritual was central to their power, the Keeper continued. When a Vanguard leader removed their helmet, it meant that negotiation was over. The next step was always total destruction. Dr. Susan Clark had been studying the psychological profiles of various species. Is that why so many Federation species still react to humans removing their helmets? The memory is built into their DNA, the Keeper confirmed. Evolution embedded the fear response so deeply that it persists even thousands of years later. When humans remove your helmets and perform those simple, natural gestures, you trigger ancient survival instincts. Jake had been thinking about the implications of everything they had learned. Keeper, if humans are descended from the Vanguard, does that mean we're destined to become like them? The Keeper's crystalline features seemed to shift as she considered the question. That is the great unknown, Captain Morrison. Humans show many Vanguard characteristics, but you have also developed qualities that the Vanguard never possessed. What kind of qualities? Tony Reed asked. Empathy, the Keeper replied. The Vanguard were logical and efficient, but they lacked the ability to truly understand other species' perspectives. Humans have that ability. You can see problems from multiple viewpoints and find solutions that benefit everyone. The displays changed to show more recent human history. The Keeper had been monitoring human development for centuries, watching how the species evolved and grew. Humans have made many mistakes, the Keeper observed. You have fought wars, destroyed environments, and caused suffering. But you have also learned from these mistakes. You have developed concepts like human rights, environmental protection, and international cooperation. Ben was fascinated by the genetic data being displayed. Are you saying that humans are an improved version of the Vanguard? Perhaps, the Keeper replied. Or perhaps you are what the Vanguard could have become if they had chosen a different path. The question is whether humanity will make the same choices the Vanguard made. Commander Gary Stone, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. What happened to the Vanguard? Do you know where they went? The Keeper's expression became more serious. I have a theory, but it is only a theory. 3,000 years ago, the Vanguard reached a point where they had conquered everything worth conquering in this galaxy. They had eliminated all major threats and established perfect order. So they left? Susan asked. Not exactly, the Keeper replied. I believe they transcended. The Vanguard were always focused on efficiency and perfection. When they achieved perfect control over the galaxy, they realized that physical existence was inefficient. They found a way to exist beyond the limitations of matter and energy. The displays showed theoretical models of advanced consciousness existing in higher dimensions. The concepts were difficult to understand, but the implications were staggering. If they transcended physical existence, Jake said slowly, they might still be watching us. That is my fear, the Keeper admitted. The Vanguard may be observing humanity to see if you will follow their path. If humans develop the same destructive tendencies, they might decide to intervene. Amy had been monitoring communications during the conversation. Keeper, how does the Federation plan to handle humanity's membership, knowing our connection to the Vanguard? The Federation is divided, the Keeper replied. Some members believe that humans should be welcomed and guided away from the Vanguard path. Others believe that humanity should be contained or eliminated before you become too powerful. Lisa stepped forward. And what do you recommend? A Keeper was quiet for a long moment. I recommend that humanity be given the opportunity to prove that you can be better than your ancestors, but with conditions. What kind of conditions? Jake asked. Humans must serve as peacekeepers and mediators, the Keeper explained. Your natural psychological effect on other species can be used to prevent conflicts rather than cause them. Instead of using fear to control others, you can use it to maintain peace. The displays showed potential scenarios where human peacekeepers could prevent wars and resolve disputes. The psychological impact of human presence could be a powerful tool for diplomacy. The helmet protocol would become a managed process. The Keeper continued. Humans would be trained to remove their helmets in controlled situations, using the psychological effect strategically to maintain order without causing trauma. Ben was beginning to understand the full scope of what was being proposed. You want humans to become the galaxy's police force. Not police, the Keeper corrected. Guardians. The Vanguard ruled through fear and destruction. Humans could protect through fear and prevention. Tony was thinking about the military implications. What if other species tried to resist human authority? The beauty of the plan is that most species won't be able to resist, the Keeper replied. The genetic memory of Vanguard power is too strong. When humans demonstrate authority, other species will instinctively comply. Jake realized that they were being offered an incredible opportunity, but also an enormous responsibility. Keeper, if we accept this role, what guarantees do we have that humanity won't become like the Vanguard? None, the Keeper admitted. But that is a risk the Federation is willing to take. The alternative is continued conflict between species, wars that could destroy entire civilizations, and chaos that benefits no one. The chamber fell silent as the humans considered everything they had learned. They were being offered a chance to shape the future of the galaxy, but the price was accepting their role as descendants of the most feared species in galactic history. Captain Morrison, the Keeper said finally, you must decide not just for your delegation, but for all of humanity. Will you accept the responsibility of being the galaxy's guardians? Jake looked at his team, knowing that their answer would determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the ancient chamber, surrounded by his team and the weight of an impossible decision. The Keeper waited patiently, her crystalline form glowing softly in the dim light. Ambassador Crix stood nearby, watching the humans with careful attention. I need to discuss this with my team, Jake said finally. This decision affects all of humanity, not just the people in this room, the Keeper nodded. Of course. Take the time you need. The Federation has waited 89 years for this moment. We can wait a little longer. Jake gathered his team in a corner of the chamber where they could speak privately. Amy Davis was the first to voice her concerns. Captain, they're asking U.S. to become the galaxy's enforcers. That's a huge responsibility, and it's based on our resemblance to a species that committed genocide. Dr. Ben Carter had been analyzing the genetic data displayed throughout their conversation. Actually, Amy, I think there's more to this than just resemblance. I've been studying the biological information, and I believe humans really are descended from the Vanguard. What makes you think that? Commander Lisa Hayes asked. The DNA markers are too specific to be coincidental, Ben replied. But more importantly, I've been thinking about human history. Our rapid technological development, our ability to adapt to any environment, our natural leadership qualities. These are all Vanguard characteristics. Dr. Susan Clark had been considering the diplomatic implications. If we accept this role, we're essentially agreeing to use fear as a tool of diplomacy. That goes against everything humans have learned about cooperation and mutual respect. But it might be the only way to prevent galactic wars, Tony Red countered. If our presence can stop conflicts before they start, how many lives could we save? Jake listened to his team's arguments, knowing that each perspective had merit. The decision was complicated by the fact that refusing the Federation's offer might mean humanity would be excluded from galactic civilization, or worse, seen as a threat to be eliminated. What do you think, Amy? Jake asked. You've been monitoring Federation communications. What's your read on the situation? Amy sighed. The communications traffic suggests that the Federation is genuinely divided about humanity. Some species are terrified of us. Others are hopeful that we can bring stability. But there's also a faction that wants to eliminate the human threat before it becomes too dangerous. So we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, Lisa observed. Jake thought about everything they had learned. The Vanguard had used their power to maintain order, through fear and destruction. But they had also brought kind of peace to the galaxy, even if it was the peace of the grave. What if we could find a third option? Jake said suddenly. What if we could accept the Federation's offer, but modify it to be more humane? What do you mean? Susan asked. The Keeper said humans have developed empathy that the Vanguard never had. What if we used that empathy to create a new kind of peacekeeping? Instead of ruling through fear, we could protect through understanding. Ben was intrigued by the idea. You're talking about using our psychological effect on other species, but combining it with genuine diplomacy and problem-solving. Exactly, Jake replied. We could remove our helmets in controlled situations, use the psychological impact to get attention and respect, but then follow it up with real communication and negotiation. Amy was beginning to see the potential. It could work. The initial fear response would make other species listen to us, but then we could use that attention to find genuine solutions to their problems. Jake made his decision. He walked back to the center of the chamber where the Keeper and Ambassador Crix were waiting. Keeper, we have a proposal, Jake said. Humanity will accept the role of galactic peacekeepers, but with modifications too. The plan. The Keeper's crystalline features shifted with interest. What modifications? We want to establish a new kind of peacekeeping, Jake continued. One that uses our psychological effect to open doors for communication, not to intimidate or control. The Keeper listened carefully as Jake explained their proposal. Humans would serve as mediators and negotiators. We would use the helmet removal, ritual strategically, but only to gain the attention and respect necessary for effective diplomacy. After that, we would focus on understanding the real causes of conflicts and finding solutions that benefit everyone involved. Ambassador Crix seemed surprised by the proposal. You want to use Vanguard psychology for peaceful purposes? That's exactly what we want, Susan Clark said, stepping forward. The Vanguard used fear to impose their will. We want to use that same psychological effect to create space for genuine dialogue and cooperation. Dr. Ben Carter had been thinking about the practical applications. Keeper, would this approach be effective? Can the fear response be managed in a way that leads to positive outcomes? It is theoretically possible, the Keeper replied slowly. The initial psychological impact would certainly get attention, but converting that attention into productive communication would require exceptional skill and training. We're willing to learn, Jake said firmly. Humanity has made mistakes in the past, but we've always been able to adapt and improve. We can learn to use this ability responsibly. Amy Davis had been considering the technical aspects. We would need to develop new protocols for helmet removal. Instead of the traumatic, unpredictable encounters that happened in the past, we could create controlled situations where other species are prepared for the psychological impact. The Keeper manipulated her displays to show theoretical models of Jake's proposed peacekeeping system. The scenarios looked promising, showing humans mediating disputes between different species and helping to resolve conflicts without violence. The plan has merit, the Keeper admitted, but it would require careful implementation. Humans would need extensive training in alien psychology, diplomacy, and crisis management. We understand that, Lisa Hayes replied. We're not asking for this responsibility without preparation. We want to do this right. Tony Reed had been thinking about the security implications. What about the faction in the Federation that wants to eliminate humanity? How do we deal with them? By proving that humans can be trusted, the Keeper replied. If your species can demonstrate that you will use your abilities for protection rather than conquest, even the most fearful Federation members will eventually support you. Jake felt a surge of determination. Keeper, we want to start immediately. How do we begin this process? The Keeper was quiet for several minutes, processing everything she had heard. Finally, she spoke. Very well. The Federation will accept humanity's proposal, but with conditions. What conditions? Jake asked. First, human peacekeepers must undergo extensive training with Federation instructors. You must learn to control your psychological effect and use it responsibly. Second, all human peacekeeping activities will be monitored and evaluated by Federation observers. Third, if humans show any signs of developing Vanguard-like destructive tendencies, the peacekeeping program will be terminated immediately. Jake nodded. We accept those conditions. There is one more thing, the Keeper continued. Dr. Carter's research was correct. Humans are indeed descended from Vanguard, who remained in the galaxy. We have genetic evidence that proves this connection. Ben stepped forward, excited by the confirmation of his theory. How many Vanguard remained behind? A small population, the Keeper replied. Perhaps a few thousand individuals who chose not to transcend with the rest of their species. They settled on a remote planet and gradually evolved into what we now know as humans. Amy was fascinated by the implications. So humanity really is the next generation of Vanguard. Yes, the Keeper confirmed. But you have the opportunity to be better than your ancestors. The original Vanguard were limited by their inability to understand other perspectives. Humans have evolved beyond that limitation. Jake felt the weight of history and future responsibility settling on his shoulders. What happens now? Ambassador Crix stepped forward. Now we return to the Federation Council and present your proposal. If they approve it, humanity will begin training as galactic peacekeepers within 6 months. The Keeper added, Captain Morrison, you should know that the success or failure of this program will determine not just humanity's future, but the future of galactic civilization itself. If humans can prove that power can be used responsibly, you will usher in a new era of peace and cooperation. And if we fail? Susan asked. Then the galaxy will likely descend into the same chaos that existed before the Vanguard brought order. The Keeper replied, the difference is that this time there may be no one left to restore peace. Jake looked around at his team, seeing determination and resolve in their faces. We won't fail. Humanity has come too far to let fear and power corrupt us now. 2 weeks later, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon as they prepared to return to Earth. The Federation Council had approved humanity's peacekeeping proposal, and preparations were already underway for the training program. Amy was monitoring communications from Earth, where news of humanity's new role was being received with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Captain, Earth Command wants a full briefing as soon as we return.